Welcome everybody to the Dirty Boots Show. I'm Erin Westover, product marketer at Assigner, and today I have Christine Barnes with me. She is the executive director for NUCA of Colorado, which if you don't know means National Utilities Contractors Association, and it's the only association focused on the utility construction sector. They do stuff like building relationships, creating opportunities, education, and then they are involved with legislation around the utilities industry as well. So thank you so much for being here, Christine. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you for the introduction. I had no idea I had so much that went along with our name. That's great. So just a little bit about myself and the association. The National Utility Contractors Association represents over 2,000 companies in the utility construction industry. So that's everyone from excavators and contractors to suppliers to the industry, as well as any supporters of our industry as well. And right now, we represent in Colorado over 80 of those member companies. And again, they include, contractors, specialty contractors, institutions, which would be your municipalities, and as well as Colorado 811, who we have a great relationship with. And then, of course, like I said, our suppliers to the industry. I've been in association management for over 15 years now, and that's what I kind of chose to make my career in. And I've worked with other types of associations in other industries, and then had this opportunity about 6 years ago when the Colorado chapter was looking for new representation. So it's been really great. I love the people that I get to work with and the leadership, as well as the national association that we have a great relationship with too. In NUCA, there's over, probably close to 40 chapters that cover the country. And we are in most states, not all, but we are working on all.
Awesome. And someone that was new to construction when I started here at Assigner, with utilities, it was one of those things where I was like, you just never think of until you're like, wait, anytime we do any kind of build, we're going to need to think about utilities and how this is all going to connect. So to me, it makes sense why you have not just these businesses, but other people involved in this industry as well as part of the association.
Absolutely. And, and you mentioned before that we are giving a specific voice to the utility contractors. And that's really how we set ourselves apart from other associations that might be related or even construction related, but we are giving a specific voice to the utility industry, not just through our state chapter, but also on a national level with our government affairs that we're doing. We also have local representation through a lobbyist here. And we like to kind of say that we are giving our companies a seat at the table. Right? You're not a small fish in a big pond where we are. We're all equal size, and everyone gets that equal voice, and they also get that individual attention from us. So it's really nice, and it's been great watching the chapter grow. I did not have a utility background when I started with the chapter. So, I thought to myself, well, this is a great opportunity. And like I said, I know association management, but I would have to learn about utilities. And my husband is in construction, so I've got, a little bit of that knowledge, but again, not specific to utilities. And the people that I get to work with, my leadership, have been so wonderful with teaching me about new things specific to the industry. Any questions that I've had, they've just been a really great group to work with to come together and answer questions, and then also expand on our industry knowledge and different technology and various things that are out there that have changed, to help the industry over the last 6 years. So it's been great. I came on about 7 years after the chapter was formed. So we actually got our charter in 2009.
Okay, yeah, relatively recently, it seems.
Yeah, it's not that long ago. It feels like it's been longer, but when you look at it, it really hasn't. So yeah, I guess I just assumed even when I first started that they had been around for a long time. But that kind of goes to show too that, like you said, utilities are important, and that is why we have a specific voice, and why enough people decided that, hey, there needs to be a specific association that deals with utilities. Something that we've been trying to coin when we go to Washington, D.C. and we lobby is subsurface. And it's exactly like you said, every building, every structure needs infrastructure, whether it's a water line, a gas line, an electrical line, a cable line, even. We represent those people that are putting those subsurface utilities in the ground. So, a lot of times when our public figures are talking about infrastructure, they're thinking about like roads and bridges, the things that you can see, which makes sense. And those are like the pretty things. But the things that you really honestly cannot live without are water, gas, electric, like your resources like that. So that's always kind of been our point, to make sure when you talk about infrastructure that you're talking about, not just the roads and bridges, but you're also talking about the subsurface utilities that people have to survive on. A couple of our members use some colorful ways to, in a good way, remind people. Actually, my immediate past president, he'll ask the question, do you like to flush? And you're mid conversation, and like a very serious conversation, and all of a sudden this guy who's very well revered in the industry is like, excuse me, do you like to flush? And I'm sitting there like, oh my gosh, where is he going with this? What is happening? And and then of course the person's like, yeah, doesn't everybody? And he goes, exactly, I'm the person who makes sure you can keep flushing.
Mm-hmm. I love that.
Right, right, it gets your attention.
So absolutely important work that you guys are doing for an industry that is really important is basically how I summarize that in my mind. And I'm so glad that we're having this discussion for all the reasons that you just said, because it is overlooked, and that's so important to note, I think, because we can't see it. So
Right,
yeah.
right.
So in that vein, you said before we hit record that you are very busy for the rest of the year. So what are some things that you're working on?
Well, so, kind of switching gears here on a little bit more serious terms, we really as an industry try to focus on the hot topics, that are going on, that have been going on. And something that I have learned is absolutely staggering is that construction has the second highest suicide rate. I just didn't realize. So that means 45.3 workers per 100,000 commit suicide each year. That's greater than 5,500 per year nationwide. And that's 15 per day.
Mm-hmm.
It really hit home, because I thought to myself, well, okay, in the 80 plus companies that we represent, that's thousands of people right there. How many of those people are in that statistic? And then, so like I said, that's 15 per day. Then I also realized that's 3.5 times greater than the national average.
Wow.
And this is specific to the construction industry, and something that I'll touch on later. Are of course all the we focus on safety with NUCA, and so there's a lot of things that can go wrong on a job site, but there are more suicides than all occupational injuries combined. So this is something that, of course, we try to help our membership with any way that we possibly can in a variety of ways. And we just had a seminar on suicide prevention and mental health and substance abuse, which all, of course, seem to go hand in hand. We had two amazing speakers come and donate their time to us and speak to our group. And in that instance, we were focusing on, okay, what can we do for people that are in crisis, right? And most of the people that attended this seminar were like your safety managers and safety directors, those people that on a job site are paying attention to all of their crews. So they're visiting like multiple job sites a day. They're touching, their actual guys out in the field. Each day they're seeing them. And it was, okay, how do you give this person that's overseeing all of these people, the knowledge and the resources to be able to hopefully recognize when someone needs help. Or, if they're lucky enough to have someone come to them, okay, what do they do from there? Because you're not expecting, your safety director or your safety manager to be a trained professional and be able to, to talk you off the ledge. You're hoping that that person can direct you to resources that will be able to help you.
Mhm.
So we as NUCA are trying to provide as many resources as possible. And that includes having an action plan for your company. That includes having, a crisis hotline or knowing the number to that. That includes, having these things readily available
Mhm.
and posting them around your office, talking about it with your crew leaders, with your guys out in the field, making sure that everyone is aware that help is available. Another thing that really hit home for me too was one of our speakers talked about having intentional conversations. And that sort of led to getting to know your people, getting to know your employees, whether you have 15 or 200. It's kind of your job to get to know these people. She makes it a point to have intentional conversations with her crews, with her
Mhm.
people. The nice thing too is that that when she asks you, like, hey, how's it going today? How are you doing? She means it and she wants you to give a response, not just, oh, fine, yeah, I'm okay.
Mhm.
So that's kind of part of it too. It's not just checking in, it's going that extra step.
Yeah. And even and I knew we were going to talk about this on this episode, and the first thing I thought of was just like, I even feel, a little bit funny to bring it up, right? And I think that's why there's not enough support out there. And especially in an industry that's dominated by males, that has, I think like 90 something percent male. Already we don't have much in our society that says it's okay to say how you feel and to bring up when you're having a problem. It's challenging because I love what you said about having resources available. It's good to know
Mhm.
what's out there, but I
Mhm.
think more than that, it's about really knowing how they're doing, and that takes those intentional conversations. So I was so happy that you brought up just like, yeah, just I try to have a rapport with them, if you will, on like you can talk to me, and I actually want to know how you're doing.
You're absolutely right. This is mostly a male dominated field. It's taboo to talk about your feelings. Most of the attitude is, I'll rub some dirt on it, you'll be fine. And
Mhm.
we need to make it not that way. It needs to become more commonplace to have these talks, to just kind of go over these things, and not just once a year. There are companies that have extensive action plans and resources available. And then there's companies that don't, and it may not be because they haven't thought about it. It may just be that they don't have the resources for that. So again, that's what NUCA is trying to provide. I actually had an experience a couple years ago where one of my members that I know well called me and said, hey, Christine, I just had a job site incident. It was pretty bad, and my guys witnessed this. I know you talked about we have some resources. Like, is there a number I can call? Can I call someone? And I said, absolutely. Yes, absolutely. The amazing thing too is that when I called this person who was the resource and gave them a heads up, first thing this person says, and he was in the middle of giving a talk at the time, he says, wait a minute, are you in crisis? And I said, I think so. He said, hold one moment, gets off of his talk, says, I'm terribly sorry, I have to go. And literally within 5 minutes, we had my member in touch with this person who was the resource to start the conversation, to get the help, to move on to whatever else would be needed, in that particular situation. So they don't mess around. And that was something that now that I've actually started the process of using that resource and gotten someone in touch with that, I can say firsthand, okay, we can get you help within 5 minutes.
I love any kind of story where the people that that we're supposed to be able to depend on in those moments really do care like that. So for that person to like just stop what they're doing, and I really do believe there are people out there willing to do that. And it's nice that like you guys know you have those resources, you have those numbers, so you can be like, no, like actually call this place, like they
Yes.
will actually help you.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, it's not just talk. There's also this mad rush before snow comes for us. So people are a little more anxious. People are moving faster, they're maybe not taking quite as much time for themselves. They're focusing more on getting the job done, kind of leading into the other part of what I was saying with the job being a dangerous job sometimes. We have this huge trench safety summit that we put on each year, and we partner with NACSA, which is the North American Excavation and Safety Association. So they deal, specifically with digging, basically.
Mhm.
And we put on this trench safety summit, and it's out at Adams County Fairgrounds. And we have literally 500 industry professionals out on that day for a full day of training. OSHA does half of the presentation for us, which is great. For half the day, we do live demonstrations. And then the other half of the day, we have speakers talking about different safety related, trench related issues. The thing that people don't realize is that when the fire department comes out to try to do a trench rescue, the majority of the time, it's a recovery. People don't realize that. You're down in a trench, you don't realize how much that dirt weighs. You don't realize what's going on if you don't have the proper shoring. So shoring, of course, is the equipment that's used to keep, those dirt walls up and off of you. And I think another thing that, people don't realize too are how many deaths actually occur with trench collapses. So in 2022 alone, there were 39 workers that died in trench collapses. That's more than twice as much as what occurred in 2021. So we're doing worse, not better. And Colorado is not so great on those statistics either, specifically. But those are the things that people don't realize. And shoring, we have several shoring companies that have every piece of equipment you could imagine, to help you with what you're doing, with what you're excavating, any type of project. So the other portion, of course, of that is OSHA being there to teach people the correct way to use this shoring. So we have a huge group of volunteers that get out there the day before. They dig the trenches, they set everything up. The shoring companies come in and, again, volunteer their time, volunteer their equipment to put that in the hole. They show you, the shoring company's there to show you and tell you everything about their piece of equipment. OSHA is there to tell you the correct and incorrect way to install the shoring. And then all of these attendees are there to hopefully, again, learn something new or remind them of what they're supposed to be doing. And these are dedicated people because they don't ever want to see a fatality. They want you to go home to your family. And a lot of times too, there's been instances where generations of families have passed away because there's like a son and a father and an uncle that are all working together, and the son goes into a trench collapses, the father freaks out and goes into that trench after the son. I mean, there are instances like that. It is absolutely heartbreaking. I think the worst one that I heard about in Firestone, there were two gentlemen that went into a trench and they did not have shoring. The shoring piece of shoring equipment was, I heard, like 500 feet away. They didn't put it in the hole. And these two men went into the trench. Trench collapsed. The two gentlemen were alive for a while. Mm-hmm. And they actually were able to talk to their loved ones and say goodbye through a PVC pipe that was in the hole with them. They were in there for a long time. But again, the pressure of all that dirt, the pressure of being in there, they, even after all of that time, the fire department did a recovery because they were not able to get those people out in time. It takes them minimum about 45 minutes just to set up to where they are safe to start excavating and getting into the hole.
Wow, this
Mhm.
is
Mhm.
insanely enlightening. I before really looking into this before this conversation, I'd been on job sites before where they did trench training. I was like, oh, this makes sense why it's important. But now to hear that there's been more fatalities,
Mhm.
than less, like we've gotten worse. And
Mhm.
it's something that's been around probably for a long time, digging trenches. If this isn't too big of a question, is what do you think is the reason for that? Do you think we haven't been advancing maybe technology? Do you think people just are in a hurry or a combination of the two? I just find that so interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I would be speculating, but I would honestly say, yeah, it's probably a combination of things. If you think about the last few years, we have had a workforce that is, not as robust as what it once was. We've had a lot of people retiring. So those seasoned people are retiring. We've got a lot of new people that are looking for a job, and you hire someone with no experience. So I think that's part of it, which is why we try to offer as much training as we possibly can. I think it's also trying to work faster because there's been a lot of delays on jobs because of having a lack of resources available as far as materials being delayed, materials not coming in. And then once you finally get them, you want to finish things quickly so that you can stay on a particular timeline.
All the pressure everyone's feeling, and it
Mhm.
really just comes down to taking care of your people, but it's hard to do that when there's all these other things to focus on, which honestly brings me back to the work that you're doing at NUCA, which is literally to support the people in this industry and provide them with this education and remind them, because I can, when you do the job so many times, I'm sure you're not thinking about what could go wrong, but then I hear that story
Right.
about the person that's talking to their loved ones, and I'm like, that's enough for me to be like,
Isn't that horrible? I mean,
oh,
yeah, it's oh my gosh. And that's the thing too that people don't realize that we talk about is that people think like, trench collapses happen in like 20 feet. No, it doesn't have to be that deep. And you don't have to be completely buried. Let's say a trench collapses and somebody's buried like up to their waist. Well, like I said, it takes a long time to get that person out. They're not going to just kind of like wiggle out or,
no.
and you're not supposed to just try to dig them out. I mean, you try to call emergency services, try to get things set up. But in the meantime, that person is essentially being crushed by the weight of this dirt. So once they even get that person out, they may be talking to you the entire time,
Mhm.
but then once they get that person out, then they have to deal with compression syndrome. And a lot of times that is how they expire, after that, depending on how long it's been, depending on the
Yeah.
situation. So, and at the very least, they've got a ton of issues to deal with because of that, physical issues, medical issues from that. Again, because you're not getting that person out in a few minutes. I mean, it's potentially hours.
Gosh.
So,
And I have to say, I hadn't even really thought about that. It's funny in my mind. I'm like, if it's just up to your like waist, you can just pull yourself out. But it's like, no,
right.
this is completely different. And also, it's just back to just the education part. Making sure people understand this.
What we're trying to promote is just a culture of safety. And for NUCA specifically, that's our number one priority is safety and training. It always has been. And again, that's just another way that we are trying to set ourselves apart.
Before I let you go, I know that you were in marketing before this, you were in real estate. You just said at the beginning of this interview that you had been involved in associations before. So what I'm dying to know is what inspires you the most about your job? Why do you do what you do? Why did you dedicate your career to this?
So I specifically for association management, and it's funny. So my degree is in business and marketing, and I actually started in hospitality. I think everyone should start in hospitality. I'm
Agreed.
not even kidding. Like it's so great, and it's really funny because I still use some of the things that I learned in hospitality to this day. With what I do with working with people, and from there, you mentioned real estate. So I actually used to work with realtor associations. So I was not in real estate, but I worked with realtor associations. And then I took some time to start my family. And when I was ready to kind of go back to work again, there was this opportunity with the utility contractors. So I incorporated, my marketing, my business, everything to this because I actually have my association management company. And then I do this contract work with the utility contractors. And it's been, like I said, just fantastic. And I do it because I appreciate the structure and then of the association management itself. And then I also really enjoy the people that I get to work with. And so many times, my leadership and my members that I deal with the most, they ask me similar questions, and they're like, are you okay with this? Are you sure you want to do this? There's different things like that, different aspects of the job. And I tell them, I said, look, I love what I do. If I didn't, I wouldn't do it, or if I didn't like the people that I was working with, I wouldn't do it. I would choose another industry or another company or, something like that. I could make those changes. So again, I just really like what I do. I like the changes that happen each day. I love that I can be lobbying on Capitol Hill one day and then out at a job site the next. So it's just got a great amount of variety, and I like my members. I like the people that I get to work with, that I like, that I get to help.
And you're doing important work. I feel like this whole conversation has been about, and we didn't even touch on legislation, which is also so important, but you're doing so much good work for the people doing the work in utilities, and we got to look out for our people. So I think it's wonderful.
It is. And I know it sounds cliche, but it's like I said, if we get a fraction of those people that take something home with them and it saves a life later this year or next year or 5 years from now, it's worth it. It's 100% worth it.
Well, Christine, this has been such a good conversation. I've learned a lot. I can't wait for everyone else to learn everything too when they listen to this. But I just want to thank you again for joining us. Yeah, we really, really appreciate all your insights, and thank you for all the work that you do.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, Erin. I'm honored to be here. I appreciate it.